The morning sun timidly pierced through the curtains of the modest two-story house nestled on the outskirts of Asheville, a small town in upstate New York. In the spacious yet cluttered kitchen, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the faint scent of aging wood. Samuel Reed, a man in his early 30s with a furrowed brow and tired eyes, sat at the worn-out wooden table, flipping through a stack of invoices. His elderly parents, Harold and Martha Reed, bustled around the kitchen, their movements slow but purposeful. Martha, her silver hair pulled back into a tight bun, hummed a tune as she prepared breakfast, while Harold, with his weathered hands, sorted through papers scattered across the countertop. Samuel sighed heavily, running a hand through his tousled hair as he reviewed the figures before him. The family business, Reed & Sons Hardware Store, had been a cornerstone of the community for generations, but lately it seemed to be crumbling beneath the weight of financial strain. "Sam, don't forget to call Mr. Jenkins about the overdue payments," Martha reminded him, her voice gentle but firm. "I know, Mum," Samuel replied, his tone edged with frustration. "I'll get to it." As he spoke, the door to the kitchen creaked open, and Emily Reed, Samuel's wife, stepped inside. She was a petite woman with kind eyes and a warm smile, her presence bringing a sense of tranquility to the room. "Morning, everyone," Emily greeted, her voice tinged with cheerfulness. "Morning, dear," Martha replied, returning her smile. Emily crossed the room and placed a kiss on Samuel's cheek before taking a seat beside him at the table. "Anything I can help with?" Samuel glanced at her briefly before returning his attention to the invoices. "No, I've got it under control." Emily frowned slightly, sensing her husband's tension. "Are you sure? I could take a look at these if you want." "I said I've got it," Samuel snapped, his voice sharper than intended. Emily recoiled, her expression hurt. "Okay, sorry." Silence settled over the kitchen, broken only by the ticking of the antique clock on the wall. Martha exchanged a concerned glance with Harold, who sighed heavily, shaking his head. "Samuel, perhaps you should let Emily help," Harold suggested, his voice gentle but firm. "She's part of this family and wants to support you." Samuel bristled at his father's words, his pride wounded. "I don't need her help. I can handle this on my own." "Sam," Emily interjected softly, reaching out to place a hand on his arm. "We're a team, remember? We're in this together." But Samuel shrugged off her touch, his frustration boiling over. "I said I don't need your help, Emily. Just focus on taking care of the house, okay?" Tears welled up in Emily's eyes as she rose from the table, her heart heavy with disappointment. Without another word, she hurried out of the kitchen, leaving Samuel to wrestle with his inner turmoil. Harold and Martha exchanged a knowing look, their concern for their son evident in their eyes. "Samuel, you need to talk to her," Martha urged gently. Samuel rubbed his temples warily, realizing the gravity of his actions. "I know, Mum. I'll go talk to her." With a heavy sigh, he pushed back his chair and headed towards the staircase, his footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. As he climbed the stairs, a sense of guilt gnawed at his conscience, reminding him of the rift he had caused within his own family. The weight of responsibility hung heavy on Samuel's shoulders as he approached the closed door of the bedroom he shared with Emily. Taking a deep breath, he knocked softly before entering, his heart heavy with regret. "Emily, I'm sorry," Samuel began, his voice filled with remorse. "I didn't mean to snap at you. I'm under a lot of pressure lately, and I guess I took it out on you." Emily sat on the edge of the bed, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. She looked up at Samuel, her expression a mixture of hurt and understanding. "It's okay, Sam," she replied softly. "I know you're stressed, but we need to support each other, especially now." Samuel nodded, his throat tight with emotion.
"You're right. I shouldn't have pushed you away. I need you, Emily, more than ever."
Tears welled up in Emily's eyes once more as she reached out to take Samuel's hand. "I'm here for you, Sam. Always." As they sat together in silence, their hands entwined, Samuel felt a glimmer of hope amidst the darkness that had clouded his mind. With Emily by his side, he knew they could weather any storm that came their way. The morning sunlight streamed through the dusty windows of Samuel's cramped office, casting long shadows across the cluttered desk. Samuel sat hunched over a stack of paperwork, his brow furrowed in concentration as he struggled to make sense of the dwindling profits of Reed & Sons hardware store. His mind wandered, drifting away from the mundane figures and into the realm of dreams he had long abandoned. A pang of regret tugged at his heart as he recalled the aspirations he once held dear, of becoming a writer, of penning tales that would capture the imagination of readers around the world. But those dreams had been buried beneath the weight of family expectations, crushed beneath the burden of running the family business. Samuel's father had groomed him from a young age to take over the hardware store, instilling in him a sense of duty and obligation that left little room for his ambitions. Lost in his thoughts, Samuel barely noticed the soft knock on his office door until it swung open, revealing the familiar figure of Emily standing in the doorway. She wore a warm smile on her face, her eyes sparkling with determination. "Hey, Sam," Emily greeted, her voice breaking through the silence of the office. "Mind if I come in?" Samuel looked up, startled by her sudden appearance, but his expression softened at the sight of her.
"Of course, Em. What brings you here?"
Emily crossed the room and took a seat opposite Samuel, her gaze unwavering. "I've been thinking about the business, Sam, and I have an idea that might help." Samuel raised an eyebrow, intrigued by Emily's sudden enthusiasm.
"Oh, what kind of idea?"
Emily leaned forward, her eyes alight with excitement. "Well, I was looking over the sales data from last quarter, and it seems like our biggest expense are coming from the inventory we're not selling quickly enough. I think if we reorganize the store layout and focus on promoting those items, we could see a significant increase in profits." Samuel's eyes widened in surprise, impressed by Emily's insight.
"That's a really good idea, Em. I hadn't thought of that."
Emily smiled, her confidence bolstered by Samuel's praise. "Thanks, Sam. I've been trying to learn more about the business so I can help out where I can." Samuel felt a swell of pride mixed with a twinge of guilt as he looked at his wife, realizing just how much she had to offer.
"You've done more than help, Em. You've given me a fresh perspective when I needed it most."
As they discussed Emily's idea further, Samuel felt a weight lifting off his shoulders, a glimmer of hope igniting within him. With Emily's support, perhaps he could turn things around for the business and himself. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity as Samuel and Emily worked tirelessly to implement Emily's plan. They spent long hours at the hardware store, rearranging shelves, creating eye-catching displays, and promoting the inventory they wanted to move. Their efforts paid off sooner than expected as customers began to take notice of the changes and flocked to the store in droves. Sales soared and profits climbed steadily upward, breathing new life into Reed & Sons hardware store. Samuel couldn't help but marvel at this transformation, feeling a sense of pride swell within him as he watched the business thrive once more. And yet, beneath the surface, a nagging sense of unease lingered, a whisper of doubt that refused to be silenced. As the weeks turned into months, Samuel found himself grappling with conflicting emotions. He was grateful for Emily's contributions and the success they had achieved together. But on the other hand, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was still living in the shadow of his father, that he was still just a pawn in his father's game. One evening, as Samuel sat alone in his office, poring over the latest sales report, his thoughts drifted back to his childhood dreams of becoming a writer. He couldn't help but wonder what might have been if he had followed his path instead of succumbing to the expectations placed upon him. Lost in his reverie, Samuel was startled out of his thoughts by the sound of footsteps approaching. He looked up to see Emily standing in the doorway, a concerned look on her face. "Hey, Sam," Emily said softly, crossing the room to take a seat beside him. "You've been working late every night this week. Is everything okay?" Samuel sighed heavily, running a hand through his hair. "Oh, I don't know, Em. I just feel like no matter what I do, it's never enough. I'm still stuck in this job that I never wanted, living a life that feels like it belongs to someone else." Emily reached out to take Samuel's hand, her touch gentle and reassuring. "Sam, you've accomplished so much. You took a struggling business and turned it around, all while dealing with the pressure of family expectations. That's no small feat." Samuel smiled weakly, grateful for Emily's words of encouragement. "Thanks, Em. I know you're right. It's just sometimes it's hard to see past the doubts and insecurities." Emily squeezed his hand affectionately. "I understand, Sam. But just remember you're not alone in this. I'm here for you, every step of the way." The flickering fluorescent lights cast a harsh glow over Samuel's office as he sat alone at his desk, the weight of his guilt pressing down on him like a suffocating blanket. He stared blankly at the computer screen, his mind consumed by thoughts of the affair he had been carrying on with his secretary, Claire. It had started innocently enough, a lingering glance here, a casual touch there. But before Samuel knew it, he had been swept up in a whirlwind of passion and desire. At first he had tried to resist it, telling himself it was just a momentary lapse in judgment, a fleeting distraction from the monotony of his daily life. But as the weeks passed, Samuel found himself drawn deeper and deeper into the affair, unable to resist the pull of Claire's seductive charms. She had a way of making him feel alive again, of igniting a fire within him that had long since been extinguished. And yet, even as he revelled in the illicit thrill of their clandestine meetings, Samuel couldn't shake the gnawing sense of guilt that gnawed at his conscience. He loved his wife, Emily, with all his heart, and the thought of betraying her trust filled him with a profound sense of shame. Lost in his turmoil, Samuel barely noticed the soft knock on his office door until it swung open, revealing the familiar figure of Claire standing in the doorway. She wore a sultry smile on her lips, her eyes smouldering with desire. "Hey, Sam," Claire purred, her voice dripping with honeyed sweetness. "Miss me?" Samuel's heart pounded in his chest as he looked up at Claire, his conflicting emotions warring within him. "Claire, we can't keep doing this. It's wrong." Claire sauntered into the room, her movements graceful and fluid. "Oh, come on, Sam. Don't tell me you didn't enjoy every minute of it." Samuel sighed heavily, running a hand through his hair. Of course I enjoyed it, but that doesn't make it right. I have a wife, Claire. A family." Claire rolled her eyes, a hint of impatience creeping into her voice. "And what have they ever done for you, Sam? Your parents are constantly nagging you about the business, and your wife is too busy playing housewife to even notice you're alive. You deserve better than that." Samuel bristled at Claire's words, his loyalty to his family roaring with his desire for something more. "That's not fair, Claire. My family means everything to me, even if they don't always show it." Claire scoffed, her disdain evident in her voice. "Please, Sam. You're just fooling yourself. You'll never be happy with them. But with me, you could have everything you've ever wanted. Think about it, Sam. Think about us." As Samuel looked into Claire's eyes, he felt a familiar pull deep within him, a yearning for something more, something exciting and forbidden, and yet, even as he felt himself being drawn towards her, he couldn't shake the nagging sense of guilt that gnawed at his conscience. "I need some time to think, Claire," Samuel replied finally, his voice heavy with uncertainty. "I can't just leave my wife and family like this." Claire's expression softened, her gaze lingering on Samuel's face. "Take all the time you need, Sam, but just know that I'll be there, waiting for you, whenever you're ready to make the right choice." With that, Claire turned and swept out of the office, leaving Samuel alone with his thoughts. He sat in silence for a long moment, his mind awash with conflicting emotions, before finally rising from his desk and making his way home to face the consequences of his actions. As he drove through the quiet streets of Ashtonville, Samuel couldn't shake the feeling that his life was spiralling out of control, that he was teetering on the edge of a precipice from which there could be no return. And yet, even in the depths of his despair, a small glimmer of hope flickered within him, a whisper of a future that was still within reach if only he dared to grasp it. The morning sun cast long shadows across the suburban streets of Ashtonville as Samuel navigated his way through his familiar roads, his mind consumed by the events of the previous day. He glanced at the clock on the dashboard, cursing under his breath as he realized he was running late for an important deal presentation at the office. Beside him, Claire sat in the passenger seat, her presence a constant reminder of the tangled web of deceit he had woven around himself. Guilt gnawed at Samuel's conscience as he thought of Emily, his loving wife, who had been nothing but supportive despite his shortcomings. As they drove in silence, Samuel's phone rang, startling him out of his thoughts. He glanced at the caller ID and felt a pang of guilt as he saw Emily's name flashing on the screen. With a heavy sigh, he ignored the call, unable to face her knowing the betrayal he had committed. Claire raised an eyebrow, her gaze lingering on Samuel's face. "Aren't you going to answer that?" Samuel shook his head, his jaw clenched with tension.
"It's nothing, just forget about it."
But even as he spoke the words, Samuel couldn't shake the feeling of unease that settled over him like a dark cloud, a nagging sense of guilt that refused to be silenced. As they arrived at the office, Samuel's heart sank at the sight of his colleagues bustling about, the air thick with anticipation. He knew he was unprepared for the presentation, his mind still reeling from the events of the previous day, but he had no choice but to push forward and face the consequences of his actions. The presentation went about as well as Samuel had feared, his nerves getting the best of him as he stumbled over his words and struggled to articulate his thoughts coherently. His clients watched in silence, their expressions a mixture of disappointment and disbelief, as Samuel fumbled through his slides, his confidence crumbling beneath the weight of his insecurities. By the time the presentation was over, Samuel knew he had blown it. The deal was lost, along with any hope of salvaging his reputation within the company. He slumped in his chair, his heart heavy with defeat. As his colleagues filed out of the conference room, their murmurs of disappointment echoing in his ears. But the worst was yet to come. As Samuel made his way back to his office, he was intercepted by his father, Harold, his expression dark with anger.
"What the hell was that, Samuel?" he barked, his voice echoing through the empty hallway.
Samuel flinched at the sound of his father's voice, his shame overwhelming.
I'm sorry, Dad. I don't know what happened."
Harold's eyes narrowed and his lips curled into a sneer of contempt.
"You don't know what happened? Do you call that a presentation? You've embarrassed the entire company, Samuel. You're a disgrace."
Samuel felt a surge of anger rising within him, his frustration boiling over.
"I'm doing the best I can, Dad. Can't you see that?"
Harold scoffed, his disdain evident in his voice.
"Your best isn't good enough, Samuel. Huh! You just don't seem to want to work harder. Your leisure time is always your top priority."
The words cut deep, slicing through Samuel's already fragile defences like a knife. He stood there in stunned silence as his father's harsh words echoed in his mind, a painful reminder of his inadequacies. As they drove home in silence, the tension between Samuel and Emily was palpable, hanging heavy in the air like a dark cloud. Samuel's mind raced with a whirlwind of emotions, anger, frustration, guilt, but beneath it all, there was a profound sense of sadness, a feeling of betrayal that he couldn't shake. When Emily finally spoke, her voice was quiet but tinged with disappointment. "Sam, why didn't you prepare for the presentation? I tried to remind you, but you ignored my calls." Samuel's jaw clenched with tension as he thought to keep his emotions in check.
"I was busy, Emily. I had other things on my mind."
Emily's eyes narrowed, her gaze piercing as she searched his face for answers. Busy with what, Sam? What could be more important than your job? Samuel felt a surge of anger rising within him, his frustration boiling over.
Why don't you just shut up, Emily? You don't understand anything.
Emily recoiled, hurt flashing in her eyes. I'm just trying to help, Sam. Why are you snapping at me? Samuel shook his head, his voice thick with emotion.
Because I'm tired of feeling like a failure, Emily. I'm tired of always being the one who has to pick up the pieces while everyone else stands by and judges me.
Emily's expression softened, her voice gentle but firm. I'm not judging you, Sam. I'm just trying to be honest with you. Maybe if you listened to me once in a while, you wouldn't be in this mess. Samuel's hands tightened on the steering wheel, his knuckles white with tension.
I don't need your lectures, Emily. I need your support.
But even as the words left his lips, Samuel knew they were a lie. Deep down he knew he was the one to blame for his downfall, that he had let his insecurities and desires lead him astray. And yet even in the depths of his despair he couldn't shake the nagging feeling that he was trapped in a web of his own making, with no escape in sight. Rain pounded against the windows of the Reed family home as Samuel stormed through the front door, his footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. He ignored Emily's pleading gaze as he made his way upstairs to their bedroom, his heart heavy with anger and resentment. With shaking hands, Samuel began to pack his bags, his mind consumed by thoughts of escape. He couldn't bear to face the disappointment in Emily's eyes any longer, couldn't bear to confront the wreckage of his own making. He just needed to get away, start anew, and leave behind the mess he had created. Emily followed him into the bedroom, her voice trembling with emotion. Sam, oh, what are you doing? Where are you going? Samuel didn't meet her gaze as he continued to pack his belongings, his movements swift and determined.
I'm leaving, Emily. I can't do this any more.
Emily's eyes widened in shock, her voice barely above a whisper. Leaving? But why, Sam? What did I do? Samuel finally turned to face her, his expression hardened with bitterness.
It's not about you, Emily. It's about me. I can't stay here, trapped in this miserable existence any longer. I need to start afresh, to pursue my dreams for once.
Emily's eyes brimmed with tears as she struggled to comprehend the magnitude of Samuel's words. But what about us, Sam? What about our marriage? Samuel shook his head, his voice laced with resentment.
What about it, Emily? It's been falling apart for years. This isn't just about one bad presentation. It's about everything. I'm tired of feeling like a failure, tired of living in your shadow.
Emily recoiled as if struck, her heart breaking with each harsh word that fell from Samuel's lips. My shadow? What are you talking about, Sam? I've always supported you, always stood by your side. Samuel laughed bitterly, his eyes flashing with anger.
Ha! Supported me? Is that what you call it, Emily? Pushing me to quit my job and become a writer so you can play the role of the breadwinner? I won't be your puppet anymore.
Emily's face paled, her hands trembling with shock. I never forced you to do anything, Sam. I just wanted what was best for you. And if that meant pursuing your passion for writing, then so be it. Samuel's eyes narrowed, his voice dripping with sarcasm.
Oh, sure. And then what? I become the laughingstock of the town, while you get to play the role of a successful career woman while being a housewife? No, thank you. I won't be emasculated by my wife.
Emily's jaw clenched with anger, her voice shaking with fury. Blame your fragile male ego for that, Sam. Don't you dare try to shift the blame onto me. I've stood by you through thick and thin and supported you even when you didn't deserve it. But if you want to throw it all away, then fine, go ahead and leave. With that, Samuel stormed out of the room, his bag slung over his shoulder, leaving Emily alone in the dimly lit bedroom, her heart shattered into a million pieces. As she listened to the sound of his retreating footsteps mingling with the pitter-patter of the rain against the window pane, Emily felt a profound sense of loss wash over her, a loss that went far beyond the crumbling ruins of their marriage. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a harsh glow over Samuel's cluttered office. Samuel sat behind his desk, fidgeting nervously with a pen as he prepared to deliver the news that would change everything. Emily sat across from him, her eyes wide with disbelief as she waited for Samuel to speak. The air between them crackled with tension, thick with the weight of the impending revelation. Finally, Samuel cleared his throat, steeling himself for what he was about to confess.
Emily, there's something I need to tell you.
Emily's brow furrowed in concern as she leaned forward, her heart pounding in anticipation. What is it, Sam? Samuel took a deep breath, his voice trembling slightly as he spoke.
I've been having an affair with Claire, my secretary.
Emily's eyes widened in shock, her mouth falling open in disbelief. Claire? Your secretary? Are you serious, Sam? Samuel nodded grimly, his cheeks flushing with shame.
Yes, Emily. I'm sorry. I know it's wrong, but I couldn't help myself. She makes me feel smart and worthy like a real man.
Emily blinked in disbelief, her mind struggling to process the absurdity of Samuel's confession, and let out a chuckle. Smart and worthy? Have you seen her trying to sharpen a pencil with the electric sharpener outside, despite the seriousness of the situation? Samuel's eyes flickered towards the glass door of his office, where Claire stood with a look of intense concentration on her face as she struggled to operate the electric sharpener. He couldn't help but cringe at the sight. Emily raised an eyebrow, her lips quirking into a wry smile. Exactly! A 5-year-old could feel smart in front of someone who can't even sharpen his pencil. Samuel's embarrassment died in his throat as he realised the absurdity of his justification.
Oh, I know, Emily. I know it sounds ridiculous, but she makes me feel alive again.
Emily shook her head in disbelief, her voice tinged with sadness. Alive? Sam, what about us? What about our marriage? Samuel's expression hardened, his resolve firm.
There is no us, Emily. I'm leaving you and moving in with Claire. I won't be coming to the office anymore.
Emily felt a surge of anger rising within her, her heart pounding in her chest. You're leaving me, just like that, after everything we've been through. Samuel nodded, his voice laced with bitterness.
Yes, Emily, I've made up my mind. I need to start afresh and leave this mess behind. You can inform my parents about our separation, any way they prefer you over me.
With that, Samuel rose from his chair and made his way to the door, leaving Emily alone in the office with a mountain of emotions to process. As she watched him go, her heart heavy with sorrow, Emily couldn't help but wonder how their once happy marriage had unravelled into such absurdity. And as she stared out at Claire struggling with the electric sharpener, Emily sat alone in Samuel's office, the echoes of his confession still ringing in her ears. The rain continued to beat against the windows, a steady rhythm that matched the tumultuous storm raging within her heart. As she processed the shock of Samuel's betrayal, Emily couldn't help but feel a surge of anger and resentment bubbling beneath the surface. After years of standing by his side, supporting him through thick and thin, she had been cast aside for the sake of a fleeting affair with his secretary? Her mind raced with a whirlwind of emotions: betrayal, hurt, anger. But beneath it all there was a profound sense of sadness, a gnawing ache that seemed to hollow her from within. How could Samuel throw away everything they had built together for the sake of a fling with his incompetent secretary? Claire's bumbling attempts to operate the electric sharpener outside only served to exacerbate Emily's frustration. How could someone so inept at her job manage to capture Samuel's affections? It was absurd, ludicrous even. A part of Emily wanted to storm out of the office and fire Claire on the spot for her role in tearing her family apart. But as she considered the kind of woman she wanted to be, she knew that stooping to Claire's level would only serve to validate her actions. Instead, Emily took a deep breath and reminded herself of her values and integrity. She may have been betrayed, but she refused to let anger and bitterness consume her. She would rise above this betrayal and emerge stronger than ever before. As Emily sat in silence, she found herself talking to herself in her head, a habit she had developed over the years as a means of processing her thoughts and emotions. "You deserve better than this, Emily," she whispered to herself. "You've always been there for Samuel, supporting him through thick and thin, and this is how he repays you? By throwing it all away for some meaningless fling with his incompetent secretary? A bitter laugh escaped Emily's lips as she shook her head in disbelief. What a joke! What a cruel, absurd joke! But even as she grappled with the pain of Samuel's betrayal, Emily knew that she couldn't let the bitterness consume her. She had to rise above this, to emerge from the wreckage of her shattered marriage with her dignity and integrity intact. Taking a deep breath, Emily made a decision. She would not let Samuel's betrayal define her. She would find the strength within herself to move on and rebuild her life, even if it meant starting from scratch. As she gazed out at the storm raging outside, Emily felt a glimmer of hope flicker within her, a beacon of light amidst the darkness, guiding her toward a future filled with possibility and promise. The days passed in a blur for Emily as she navigated the tumultuous aftermath of Samuel's betrayal. With a heavy heart, she had informed Samuel's parents of his infidelity, and their reaction had been more explosive than she had anticipated. They had disowned him, refusing to even speak to him or acknowledge his existence. Left to pick up the pieces of her shattered life, Emily found herself thrust into a new role as the de facto head of Reed & Sons hardware store. It was a daunting task, one that she had never imagined herself undertaking, but she was determined to rise to the challenge. Each morning, Emily forced herself out of bed and made her way to the office, her heart heavy with sadness and grief. The familiar sights and sounds of the hardware store felt different now, tinged with a sense of emptiness and loss. As she settled into her new routine, Emily grappled with a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. On one hand, she was consumed by anger and betrayal at Samuel's actions. On the other hand, she couldn't shake the sense of loss and sadness that lingered like a shadow over her heart. But despite her pain, Emily refused to let it define her. She threw herself into her work with a newfound determination, determined to prove to Samuel's parents that she was more than capable of running the business on her own. As she navigated the complexities of managing the hardware store, Emily found herself faced with challenges she had never encountered before. From inventory management to customer relations, each task presented its own unique set of obstacles, but Emily met them head-on, with courage and determination. One day, as Emily was sorting through a stack of invoices in her office, she was interrupted by a knock on the door. She looked up to see one of the store's long-time suppliers standing in the doorway with a worried expression.
"Emily, I'm sorry to bother you," he said, his voice tinged with concern. "But there's been a mix-up with our latest shipment. It seems that some of the items are missing."
Emily's heart sank at the news, her mind racing as she tried to come up with a solution. "I'll look into it right away," she assured the supplier. "Thank you for bringing it to my attention." As the supplier left her office, Emily felt a surge of anxiety wash over her. The responsibility of running the business weighed heavily on her shoulders, and the thought of letting down her employees and customers filled her with dread. But despite her fears, Emily refused to back down. With steely determination, she set to work unravelling the mystery of the missing shipment, determined to set things right and prove to herself, and to everyone else, that she was more than capable of handling whatever challenges came her way. As the days turned into weeks, Emily threw herself into her work with a renewed sense of purpose. Despite the sadness that still lingered in her heart, she found solace in the routine of her daily tasks and in the knowledge that she was making a difference in the lives of those around her. Slowly but surely, the hardware store began to thrive once more under Emily's capable leadership. Sales increased, customers returned, and the sense of camaraderie among the staff grew stronger with each passing day. But amid the hustle and bustle of running the business, Emily couldn't shake the sense of emptiness that still gnawed at her soul. Despite her outward success, she couldn't escape the pain of Samuel's betrayal, or the sense of loss that hung over her like a dark cloud. And yet, even in her darkest moments, Emily found strength in the knowledge that she was capable of overcoming whatever challenges life threw her way. She may have been betrayed, but she refused to let it define her. She was Emily Reed, strong, capable, and determined to forge her path in life, no matter what obstacles stood in her way. The morning sun filtered through the curtains, casting a warm glow over the small apartment Samuel now called home. He sat at his cluttered desk, his laptop open before him as he stared blankly at the blank page on the screen. For months now, Samuel had been struggling to make ends meet as a struggling writer. Gone were the days of the comfortable salary he had enjoyed working in his family's hardware store. Now he scraped by on odd jobs and freelance gigs, barely making enough to cover his rent and bills. But despite his best efforts, Samuel found himself unable to find the inspiration he so desperately craved. The words refused to come, his mind a jumbled mess of thoughts and ideas that refused to coalesce into anything resembling coherent prose. Beside him, Claire sat on the worn-out couch, her expression unreadable as she watched him across the room. The spark that had once ignited their passionate affair had long since fizzled out, leaving behind a hollow emptiness that Samuel couldn't shake. "Samuel, we need to talk," Claire said finally, her voice soft but firm. Samuel looked up from his laptop, his brow furrowed in confusion.
"What is it, Claire?"
Claire hesitated for a moment, her gaze flickering uncertainly. I think this time we face the truth, Samuel. This, whatever it's between us, it's not working anymore." Samuel's heart sank at the words, a cold knot of dread forming in the pit of his stomach.
"What do you mean, Claire? Are you breaking up with me?"
Claire nodded slowly, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and resignation. "I'm sorry, Samuel. I just can't do this anymore. I thought I was in love with you, but I realize now that it was never love. It was just an excuse to boost my ego, to feel desired by someone in a position of power." Samuel felt a pang of guilt wash over him at the words, a bitter reminder of the role he had played in their doomed relationship.
"I'm sorry, Claire. I never meant to hurt you."
Claire shook her head, her expression hardened with resolve. "Oh, it's not your fault, Samuel. We both knew what this was from the beginning, but now that you're no longer in a position of power, I've lost interest. I need someone who can give me the life I deserve." Samuel felt a surge of anger rising within him at her callous words, but he knew she was right. He had used her just as much as she had used him, seeking solace in her arms as a means of escaping his failures and insecurities. With a heavy heart, Samuel nodded in resignation.
"I understand, Claire. I'll start looking for a new place to live."
Claire nodded in agreement, her eyes softening with a hint of regret. "I'll give you some time to pack your things. Just promise me you'll find a way to move on, Samuel. You deserve to be happy." As Samuel watched Claire leave the apartment to visit her friends, a profound sense of emptiness settled over him like a shroud. He had lost everything. His family, his career, now his lover. But amidst the wreckage of his shattered life, he knew that he had to find a way to pick up the pieces and start anew. The morning sun cast a warm glow over Samuel's small apartment as he sat at his cluttered desk, his mind abuzz with anticipation. Today was the day he would finally meet with the family lawyer to collect his inheritance, or so he hoped. For weeks now, Samuel had been dreaming of the future, imagining the possibilities that awaited him with his father's inheritance in hand. He had always harboured a passion for writing, and now, with the prospect of opening his own publishing house, he felt a glimmer of hope stirring within him. As he sipped his morning coffee, Samuel allowed himself to indulge in fantasies of success and prosperity. He imagined himself surrounded by stacks of books, his name emblazoned on the spines for all the world to see. He imagined the thrill of discovering new talent, of bringing their words to life and sharing them with the world. But amidst his excitement, a nagging voice in the back of his mind reminded him of the uncertainty that lay ahead. What if his father had left everything to his wife, as a punishment for abandoning the family business? What if his dreams of opening a publishing house were nothing more than a foolish fantasy, doomed to wither and die before they ever had a chance to take root? With a heavy sigh, Samuel pushed aside his doubts and fears, determined to cling to the flicker of hope that burned within him. He'd come too far to give up now, to let the weight of his past mistakes drag him down into despair. As he prepared to leave for the lawyer's office, Samuel allowed himself to bask in the warmth of the morning sun, a sense of optimism coursing through his veins. Today was the day he would reclaim his future, the day he would take the first steps towards building a life of purpose and meaning. With a renewed sense of determination, Samuel grabbed his keys and headed out the door, his heart pounding with anticipation. Whatever lay ahead, he knew that he was ready to face it head-on, armed with nothing but his dreams and the unwavering belief that better days were waiting just around the corner. The sun beat down mercilessly as Samuel made his way through the bustling streets of Ashtonville, his heart heavy with a mixture of resignation and anticipation. 3 months had passed since he had left behind the ruins of his old life, and now he found himself standing before the imposing facade of the family lawyer's office, his footsteps echoing in the empty corridor. With a heavy sigh, Samuel pushed open the door and stepped into the cool interior of the office, the air thick with the scent of old paper and ink. He approached the receptionist's desk, his stomach churning with nerves as he announced his presence.
"I'm here to see Mr. Thompson,"
he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The receptionist nodded curtly, her gaze flickering disinterestedly over Samuel's dishevelled appearance. "Take a seat, he'll be with you shortly." Samuel sank into one of the worn-out chairs in the waiting area, his mind swirling with 1,000 thoughts and emotions. He had come to collect his inheritance, the final vestige of his old life, but he couldn't shake the feeling of apprehension that gnawed at the edges of his mind. After what felt like an eternity, Mr. Thompson emerged from his office, a folder clutched in his hand.
"Oh, Mr. Reed, please come in."
Samuel rose from his seat, his heart pounding in his chest as he followed Mr. Thompson into the dimly lit office. He took a seat opposite the lawyer's desk, his palms sweating as he waited for the inevitable.
Well, Mr. Reed, I'm afraid I have some news regarding your inheritance," Mr. Thompson said gravely, his voice tinged with regret.
Samuel nodded solemnly, his expression resigned.
"I understand, Mr. Thompson. Please tell me."
Mr. Thompson opened the folder and began to read aloud, his words echoing in the silence of the room.
"Well, due to the success of Reed & Sons hardware store under the management of your wife, Emily Reed, your parents have decided to leave the business to her entirely. As such, there is no inheritance for you to collect."
The words hit Samuel like a punch to the gut, the realization sinking in with a sickening thud. He had lost it all. His family, his dreams, his wife, everything he had ever held dear. As he stumbled out of the lawyer's office, his mind reeling with shock and disbelief, Samuel couldn't help but reflect on everything that had gone wrong. He had been so blinded by his pride and arrogance, so consumed by his desires, that he had failed to see the damage he was causing. Tears pricked at the corners of his eyes as he thought of Emily, the woman he had loved and lost. He had pushed her away time and time again, belittling her dreams and undermining her confidence until she had finally found the strength to walk away. And now, as he stood alone on the bustling city street, Samuel realized the true extent of his mistakes. He had squandered his chance at happiness, his chance at redemption, all for the fleeting promise of success and glory. With a heavy heart, Samuel trudged back to his place, the weight of his regrets pressing down on him like a leaden shroud. He had lost it all, and now he was left to face the consequences of his actions alone. But what shocked him most was not the absence of his inheritance, but rather the revelation of his wife's success in managing the business. He had expected her to struggle in his absence, to falter under the weight of the responsibility thrust upon her, but instead she had thrived, turning the struggling hardware store into a thriving business. His mind was awash with conflicting emotions. On one hand, he felt a sense of pride swelling within him at his wife's accomplishments. Despite everything he had put her through, she had persevered and succeeded beyond his wildest expectations. But on the other hand, he couldn't shake the feeling of regret that gnawed at him at the edges of his consciousness. He had abandoned his family when they needed him most, and now he was left to pick up the pieces of his shattered life alone. As he made his way through the crowded streets of Ashtonville, Samuel couldn't help but wonder what the future held in store for him. He had lost everything. The love of his wife, the support of his family, and the comfort of his old life. But perhaps amid his loss he would find something new, something worth fighting for. The sun hung low on the horizon as Samuel made his way along the winding country roads that led to the outskirts of Asheville. The air was cool and crisp, the rustle of leaves and the chirping of birds providing a soothing backdrop to his troubled thoughts. As he approached the sprawling estate that had once been his childhood home, Samuel felt a knot form in the pit of his stomach. He hadn't seen his parents since the day he had left them in anger and despair, and now, faced with the prospect of confronting them once more, he couldn't help but feel a sense of trepidation. With a heavy heart, Samuel pulled up to the front gates and pressed the intercom button, his voice trembling slightly as he announced his presence.
"It's me, Samuel. I've come to see my parents."
There was a moment of silence, broken only by the crackle of static before the gate swung open with a creak, allowing Samuel to pass through. He drove up the winding driveway, his heart pounding in his chest as he approached the imposing facade of the family home. As Samuel stepped out of the car, he was greeted by the sight of his mother standing on the front porch, her arms crossed over her chest as she regarded him with a mixture of sadness and resignation. "Samuel," she said softly, her voice tinged with sadness, "I didn't expect to see you here." Samuel swallowed hard, his throat tight with emotion.
"I wanted to talk to you and Dad. It's important."
His mother nodded slowly, her eyes betraying the pain that lurked beneath the surface. "Come inside, we'll talk." As Samuel followed his mother into the house, he couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt wash over him. He had abandoned his parents when they needed him most, leaving them to pick up the pieces of the family business in his absence, and now, faced with the consequences of his actions, he couldn't shake the feeling of shame that gnawed at the edges of his consciousness. Once inside, Samuel found himself seated across from his mother in the cosy confines of the living room, the weight of their conversation hanging heavy in the air. "Samuel," his mother began, her voice gentle but firm, "your father won't be joining us. He refuses to see you or speak to you." Samuel felt a lump form in his throat at her words, his heart heavy with the weight of his father's rejection.
"I understand,"
he whispered hoarsely. His mother sighed, her gaze softening with compassion. "Samuel, do you know what hurt us the most? It wasn't that you left. It was that you didn't even say goodbye. You didn't once come to us and tell us your plans. You just left us with the company. You abandoned your wife, expecting us to pick up the pieces." Samuel hung his head in shame, his eyes burning with unshed tears.
"I'm sorry, Mum. I was a fool. I let my insecurities and fears drive me away from the people who loved me most."
His mother reached out and placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch gentle and comforting. "We know, Samuel, and we forgive you, but you need to understand that there are consequences to your actions. You can't just walk away from your responsibilities and expect everything to be okay." Samuel nodded solemnly, his heart heavy with regret.
"I know, Mum, and I'm sorry. I've spent the past few months grappling with my own mistakes and failures. I've realized that I've spent my entire life feeling like I wasn't good enough, like I didn't deserve the love and support of those around me, but now, faced with the consequences of my actions, I realize that I was the one holding myself back all along." His mother smiled sadly, her eyes brimming with tears. "Oh, Samuel, you are more than good enough. You are our son, and we love you more than anything in this world." Samuel felt a surge of emotion welling up inside him, a mixture of gratitude and relief flooding his senses. "Thank you, Mum. Please tell Dad that I'm sorry. I understand if he doesn't want to see me, but I want him to know that I love him."
His mother nodded, her smile tinged with sadness. "I will, Samuel. But you need to understand that things won't be the same between us. You've hurt us deeply, and it will take time for us to heal." Samuel nodded in understanding, his heart heavy with the weight of his own mistakes.
"I know, Mum, and I'll do whatever it takes to make things right, I promise."
With a heavy heart, Samuel rose from his seat and made his way to the front door, his mind swirling with a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. As he stepped out into the cool evening air, he felt a newfound sense of determination stirring within him, a determination to rebuild the bridges he had burnt and to forge a new path forward one step at a time. Meanwhile, Emily sat across from Mark at a cosy cafe, the warm aroma of freshly brewed coffee filling the air as they chatted animatedly over steaming mugs. Mark was a gentleman she had met through mutual friends, and from the moment they had met, she had been struck by his kindness and genuine nature.
So, Emily, tell me more about yourself,
Mark said, his eyes sparkling with interest. Emily smiled, feeling a sense of ease wash over her in Mark's presence. Well, I took on the task of working at my family's hardware store. I've been managing the business for the past few months, and it's been quite the journey. Mark nodded thoughtfully, a look of admiration crossing his features.
That's impressive, Emily. It takes a lot of courage to take on such responsibility. I admire your determination.
Emily felt a swell of pride at his words, a sense of validation washing over her. It was a far cry from the constant criticism and doubt she had faced from her husband in the past. "Thank you, Mark," she said, her voice tinged with gratitude. "It hasn't been easy, but I'm learning to trust in my abilities and instincts." Mark reached across the table and gently squeezed her hand, his touch sending a shiver of warmth through her veins.
You should be proud of yourself, Emily. You're doing amazing things, and I do not doubt that you'll continue to succeed.
As Emily gazed into Mark's kind eyes, she couldn't help but feel a sense of wonder at the difference between him and her husband. Where Samuel had been critical and dismissive, Mark was supportive and encouraging. Where Samuel had held her back, Mark urged her to be her best self. It was a stark reminder of the toxic dynamic that had defined her marriage and a testament to the newfound freedom and independence she had discovered in the wake of their separation. "Thank you, Mark," she said softly, her voice trembling with emotion. "You have no idea how much your support means to me." Mark smiled warmly, his gaze unwavering as he met her eyes.
You're welcome, Emily. Just know that I'll always be here for you, cheering you on every step of the way.
As they continued to talk and laugh, Emily couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude for the new chapter unfolding in her life. With Mark by her side, she knew that she was capable of achieving anything she set her mind to, and the future held endless possibilities for growth and fulfillment. As they said their goodbyes and parted ways, Emily felt a renewed sense of purpose coursing through her veins. She was no longer defined by her past mistakes or the limitations others had placed upon her. Instead, she was free to embrace the woman she had always been meant to be, a woman unafraid to chase her dreams and seize her happiness. And with Mark's unwavering support by her side, she knew that anything was possible. Emily sat alone in her apartment, a steaming cup of tea cradled in her hands as she reflected on the stark differences between her past marriage and her newfound relationship with Mark. As she sipped her tea, memories of her ex-husband, Samuel, flooded her mind, each one a painful reminder of the toxic dynamic that had defined their relationship. She remembered the countless times Samuel had criticized her, belittling her efforts and undermining her confidence. Whether it was her ideas for improving the family business or her dreams of pursuing her passions, Samuel had always seemed to find a way to tear her down.
I don't know why you bother, Emily, Samuel would say, his voice dripping with disdain. You'll never amount to anything on your own. You're just wasting your time.
Emily winced at the memory, the sting of Samuel's words still fresh in her mind. It was a far cry from the supportive and encouraging words she now received from Mark, who always seemed to see the best in her, even when she struggled to see it herself.
I believe in you, Emily,
Mark would say, his voice filled with warmth and sincerity.
You have so much potential, and I know you're capable of achieving anything you set your mind to.
The contrast between Samuel's criticism and Mark's unwavering support was like night and day to Emily. Where Samuel had sought to hold her back and keep her small, Mark encouraged her to spread her wings and soar to new heights. She remembered the time she had expressed her desire to pursue her passion for painting, only to be met with ridicule and scorn from Samuel.
What's the point, Emily? He had said, a sneer twisting his lips. You'll never be any good at it. You might as well give up now.
But with Mark it was a different story entirely. When Emily had shared her love for painting with him, he had listened attentively, offering words of encouragement and support.
I would love to see your artwork, Emily,
Mark had said, his eyes shining with genuine interest.
Oh, I'm sure you're incredibly talented. I would be honoured to support you in any way I can.
The difference in their reactions was staggering to Emily. Where Samuel had sought to crush her dreams, Mark embraced them with open arms, eager to see her succeed and thrive. As Emily continued to reflect on her past and present relationships, she couldn't help but feel a profound sense of gratitude for the newfound love and support she had found in Mark. With him by her side, she felt empowered to pursue her passions and chase her dreams, free from the weight of Samuel's criticism and negativity. With a smile on her lips and warmth in her heart, Emily knew that she had finally found the love and acceptance she had been searching for all along. As she looked to the future, she felt a sense of excitement and hope bubbling up inside her, a hope for a life filled with love, laughter, and endless possibilities. The piercing ring of the phone echoed through Emily's silent apartment, its sound cutting through the stillness like a sharp blade. With a hesitant breath, she reached out and picked up the receiver, her hand trembling slightly as she brought it to her ear. "Hello?" she said, her voice betraying her uncertainty.
"Emily, it's me," came Samuel's voice on the other end of the line. The mere sound of his voice sent a rush of conflicting emotions coursing through Emily's veins. Memories, both bitter and sweet, flooded her mind, reminding her of the tumultuous journey that she had shared with this man, the man who was once her husband. "Samuel," she breathed out softly, her voice tinged with a mixture of sadness and apprehension. "What do you want?" There was a palpable pause on the other end of the line, filled only with the sound of Samuel's laboured breathing. I wanted to talk to you, Emily," he finally spoke, his voice trembling with emotion. "I've been doing a lot of thinking lately, and I realise that I've made a lot of mistakes. I know I wasn't good enough for you, and I'm sorry for everything I put you through."
Emily's heart clenched at his words, a swell of empathy rising within her despite the pain he had caused. She had spent so long yearning for this apology, this acknowledgement of his faults, and yet now that it had finally come, she found herself struggling to accept it. "Samuel," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper, "I appreciate your apology, I do. But it's too late for that now. We can't go back to how things were." Samuel's voice cracked with emotion as he spoke, tears streaming down his cheeks like silent rivers.
"Please, Emily,"
he pleaded, his desperation palpable even through the phone line.
I can't bear the thought of losing you. I know I messed up, but I'll do anything to make things right. Please, give me another chance."
As she listened to Samuel's heartfelt plea, Emily felt a surge of conflicting emotions welling up inside her. She'd spent so long yearning for his love and acceptance, hoping against hope that he would one day realise the depth of his mistakes and beg for her forgiveness, and yet now that it was happening, she found herself hesitating, unsure of whether she could truly trust him again. Taking a deep breath, Emily steeled herself for what she knew she had to do. "Samuel," she began softly, her voice trembling with emotion, "there's someone else in my life now. His name is Mark, and he treats me with kindness and respect. He supports me in ways you never could." Emily let it all out, the hurt, the betrayal. "He doesn't push me down to feel unworthy about myself. He encourages me to shine brighter without being insecure about it. He makes me feel smart and alive." The last sentence brought back biting flashbacks to Samuel, how he had praised Claire in front of Emily, washing a wave of realization all over him. There was a pause on the other end of the line, as if Samuel was struggling to process the words. When he finally spoke, his voice was tinged with a mixture of resignation and sadness.
"I see," he said quietly. I understand. I guess I had this coming, didn't I? I'm feeling right now exactly what you must have felt. The only difference, Emily, is that you are way stronger than I am. Unlike you, hearing about another man with you makes me want to destroy myself and everything around me."
Emily felt a pang of sympathy for Samuel, knowing that he was grappling with the consequences of his actions. "Samuel," she said gently, her heart heavy with regret, "I know this is hard for you, but I need you to understand that I can't just go back to how things were. Some wounds run too deep to be healed." There was a moment of heavy silence as Samuel absorbed her words, his breathing ragged and uneven.
"I know, Emily,"
he finally whispered, his voice heavy with resignation.
"I guess some things are just not meant to be."
With a heavy heart, Emily bid Samuel farewell and hung up the phone. the weight of their conversations settling like a heavy blanket around her shoulders. She knew that she had made the right decision in choosing to move on with her life, but that didn't make it any easier to let go of the man she had once loved. As she sat alone in her apartment, surrounded by the echoes of their past, Emily felt a profound sense of sadness wash over her, but amidst the pain and regret she also felt a glimmer of hope, the hope of a future filled with love, happiness, and endless possibilities. And as she looked to the horizon, she knew that she was ready to embrace whatever lay ahead, confident in the knowledge that she was strong enough to face whatever challenges came her way. The days stretched into weeks, and Samuel found himself grappling with the harsh reality of his situation. He had lost everything. His family, his dreams, his wife, all because of his foolish pride and arrogance, and now as he navigated the lonely streets of the city, he couldn't help but feel the weight of his mistakes pressing down on him like a suffocating blanket. Each morning brought with it a fresh wave of despair, as Samuel woke to the empty silence of his apartment, the echoes of his past mistakes ringing in his ears. He had squandered his chance at happiness, his chance at redemption, all for the fleeting promise of success and glory. But as the days turned into weeks, Samuel began to come to terms with the harsh reality of his situation. He had made his bed, and now he would have to lie in it. There was no escaping the consequences of his actions, no running from the pain and regret that gnawed at his soul. One day, as Samuel wandered the crowded streets of the city, lost in his thoughts, he spotted a familiar figure in the distance. A figure that sent a pang of longing coursing through his veins. It was Emily. She was walking arm in arm with a man Samuel didn't recognize, laughter dancing in her eyes as they strolled along the bustling sidewalk. And as Samuel watched from a distance, a sense of bitter resignation washed over him like a tidal wave. He had lost her. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut, the pain of it all crushing down on him with brutal force. He'd pushed her away time and time again, belittling her dreams and undermining her confidence, until she had finally found the strength to walk away. And now, as he stood alone on the crowded street corner, watching his ex-wife with her new lover, Samuel knew that he would have to live with the loss of her and everything else he had ever held dear. With a heavy heart, Samuel turned and walked away, the weight of his regrets dragging behind him like a heavy anchor. He had made his bed, and now he would have to lie in it. There was no escaping the consequences of his actions, no running from the pain and regret that haunted him at every turn. As he disappeared into the throng of bustling city life, Samuel couldn't help but wonder if he would ever find peace amidst the chaos of his own making. But for now, all he could do was keep putting one foot in front of the other, clinging to the faint glimmer of hope that one day, just maybe, he would find redemption in the arms of forgiveness. Emily stood outside her ex-husband's parents' house, her heart pounding in her chest as she prepared to introduce her new partner to them. It was a moment she had been dreading, unsure of how they would react to the man who had stolen her heart after Samuel's departure. With a deep breath, Emily reached out and rang the doorbell, the sound echoing through the quiet neighbourhood like a bell tolling the arrival of an unexpected guest. Moments later, the door swung open, revealing Samuel's parents standing on the threshold, their faces etched with surprise. "Emily, dear, what a pleasant surprise!" Mrs. Thompson exclaimed, her eyes lighting up with warmth as she enveloped Emily in a tight embrace. "And who is this handsome young man you've brought with you?" Emily smiled nervously, her fingers entwined with her partner's as she introduced him to Samuel's parents. "This is Mark," she said softly, her voice tinged with apprehension. "He's my partner." Mark extended his hand, a warm smile playing on his lips as he greeted Samuel's parents.
"It's a pleasure to meet you both," he said politely, his eyes sparkling with genuine warmth.
Samuel's parents exchanged a knowing glance, their eyes twinkling with amusement as they welcomed Mark into their home.
"Please, come in, Mr. Thompson said jovially, gesturing for them to enter. "We were just about to sit down for tea. Won't you join us?"
As they stepped inside, Emily couldn't help but feel a surge of relief wash over her. She had been so worried about how Samuel's parents would react to her new relationship, fearing their judgment and disapproval. But as they settled around the table, sipping tea and exchanging pleasantries, Emily realized that her fears had been unfounded. To her surprise, Samuel's parents welcomed Mark with open arms, treating him like an old friend rather than a stranger. They laughed and joked together, sharing stories and reminiscing about old times as if they had known each other for years. As Emily watched them interact, a swell of emotion welled up inside her. She'd expected judgment and condemnation, but instead, she was met with acceptance and warmth. It was a stark contrast to the toxic dynamic that had defined her marriage to Samuel, a reminder of the love and support she had found in her new relationship. "I have to say, Emily," Mrs. Thompson said, her eyes shining with pride, "we've heard so much about you from Samuel. He may not have always shown it, but he was always so proud of everything you've accomplished." Emily's heart skipped a beat at her words, a lump forming in her throat as she struggled to contain her emotions. Despite everything that happened between them, it was clear that Samuel's parents still held her in high regard, and still saw her for the strong and capable woman she had always been. "And Mark," Mr. Thompson said, turning to Emily's partner with a warm smile, "we can't thank you enough for everything you've done for Emily. She's been through so much, and you've been a source of strength and support for her when she needed it most." Mark nodded humbly, his eyes shining with gratitude. "It's been my pleasure," he said softly. "Emily means the world to me, and I would do anything for her." As they continued to talk and laugh, Emily couldn't help but feel overwhelmed by the outpouring of love and support from Samuel's parents. It was a far cry from the toxic dynamic that had defined her marriage, a reminder of the love and acceptance she had found in her new relationship. As she looked around the table at the people who had once been her family, Emily couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude wash over her. Despite the pain and heartache of the past, she had found a new sense of belonging, a sense of belonging that she knew she would cherish for the rest of her days. The air was alive with excitement and anticipation as guests began to arrive at the Thompsons' elegant penthouse apartment for the much-anticipated success party of the family business. Emily stood at the entrance, greeting each guest with a warm smile and a heartfelt welcome as they entered the room. As the evening wore on, the apartment filled with laughter and chatter, the sound of clinking glasses and merry conversation echoing through the air. It was a joyous occasion, a celebration of hard work and determination, and Emily couldn't help but feel a swell of pride in her chest as she looked around at the smiling faces of her friends and family. As the time for her speech approached, Emily felt a flutter of nerves in her stomach. She had never been one for public speaking, preferring to let her actions speak louder than words, but tonight was different. Tonight, she had a message to share. A message of gratitude, resilience, and love. Taking a deep breath, Emily stepped up to the podium, her heart pounding in her chest as she prepared to address the crowd. All eyes turned to her, the room falling silent as she began to speak. "Good evening, everyone," she began, her voice clear and confident despite the butterflies in her stomach. "Thank you all so much for being here tonight to celebrate the success of our family business. It truly means the world to me to see so many familiar faces gathered together in one place." She paused for a moment, gathering her thoughts before continuing. "I want to take a moment to reflect on the journey that has brought us here tonight. It hadn't always been easy, and there have been many obstacles along the way. But through hard work, determination, and a whole lot of love and support, we have managed to overcome every challenge that has come our way." Emily's eyes swept over the crowd, lingering on the faces of her friends and family. "I want to take a moment to thank every one of you for your unwavering support throughout this journey. Whether it was a kind word of encouragement, a helping hand in times of need, or simply a shoulder to lean on when things got tough, your love and support have meant more to me than words can express." She turned to face her parents-in-law, a lump forming in her throat as she spoke. "And to my dear parents-in-law, I want to express my deepest gratitude for welcoming me into your family with open arms, for treating me like a daughter in every sense of the word. Your love and support have been a constant source of strength and inspiration to me. I'm truly blessed to have you in my life." Tears shimmered in Emily's eyes as she turned to face her partner, Mark, her heart overflowing with love and gratitude. "And to my beloved Mark," she said softly, her voice trembling with emotion, "thank you for standing by my side through thick and thin, for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself, and for showing me what true love and support mean. You are my rock, my anchor, and my greatest blessing, and I am forever grateful to have you in my life." As she spoke, Emily felt a weight lifting from her shoulders, a sense of peace and contentment washing over her like a warm embrace. She had spent so long doubting herself, so long searching for validation and approval from others. But tonight, surrounded by the people she loved most in the world, she realized that she didn't need anyone else's approval to be happy. She had found love, acceptance, and fulfillment in the arms of her family and friends, and for that she was truly grateful. With a final smile and a heartfelt thank you, Emily stepped down from the podium, her heart light and her spirit soaring. As she mingled with the guests, laughing and chatting with friends old and new, she knew that this was just the beginning of a bright and beautiful future filled with love, laughter, and endless possibilities. As she looked around at the smiling faces of her loved ones, Emily couldn't help but feel a sense of overwhelming gratitude for the incredible journey that had brought her to this moment, the moment where she had finally found true happiness and contentment in the arms of those she loved most.